Hi everyone, Dr. Shook here. I hope you're doing well today. I am really excited to share this information with you. I think that this is, when I learned this information, it was completely life-changing. It was paradigm-changing. It was understanding something that has been confusing and is so confusing for people. It has made a significant difference in my life, in the way that I practice, what I teach, and ultimately my ability to help people with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease, improve their quality of life, even slow, halt, and reverse it. I know that's a big statement, but just stay with me and you'll understand why I'm saying that, okay? So the 1990s were considered the decade of the brain. I don't know if you knew that, but it was declared the decade that we were going to unravel the mysteries of the brain, and a tremendous number of resources were dumped into it. Now, we are decades into that decade of the brain, and there has been no meaningful progress for Alzheimer's. No meaningful progress. It's still the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. It is considered terminal. There's no known drugs for it that help it, effective treatments. We'll talk about the drugs in a second. Why is that? How can it be that we've had revolutions in genetics, decoding the human genome? Biotechnology has exploded, but yet we still have no effective treatments for Alzheimer's. Why? How can that be? Why in the world could we invest all this money, all this time, have all this technology, and still be no closer to answering the question and the problem that is Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline? How can that be? And it really comes down to the problem of Alzheimer's. See, the problem with Alzheimer's is that there are multiple causes. So there are so many causes of Alzheimer's, which we'll talk about in a second, that when you try to match a drug that works through one mechanism with a problem that has multiple causes, multiple mechanisms, it's not going to work, right? It is not going to work. It's impossible. It will not work. So that's why we've had 244 drugs studied, billions upon billions of dollars invested. Guess how many drugs have been approved? How many drugs have been approved? 2 drugs. Two drugs have been approved. And guess what? These medications, they don't even treat the cause. They don't treat the cause. What they do is they affect the neurochemistry of your brain, but they don't affect the problems that are driving the plaque formation in the brain, the tangling of they call them neurofibrillary tangles. They're not doing anything that addresses that because they don't understand the mechanism. They're treating it as if it is a single disease, and they're not recognizing, they're not identifying the multiple causes, right? So you're not going to have an effective single drug, single mechanism solution because it's multifactorial. You've got multiple problems driving the process. Okay, how in the world could one drug that works on one mechanism fix all these problems? It can't do it. That's why it's failed. That's why the last time a drug was approved, this will blow your mind, was 2003. The last time a drug was approved for Alzheimer's was 2003. All these other medications fail, one after the other, because they're looking at it the wrong way. So, beta amyloid plaques, are they an adaptive response? Is it something that the body's doing? Why is the body doing it? It's the question. Why is the body creating these plaques in the brain, which are associated with Alzheimer's, which are believed for years, this plaque formation hypothesis, that if we could get rid of the plaque, we could improve the condition, okay? That if we could get rid of it, we could improve the condition. But the reality is that when they studied these plaques of the brain, they noticed that it destroys the synapses. So the plaques in the brain, yes, it destroys the connections between the neurons so that you don't have good cognitive function. However, the synapses, but it also, guess what it also does? It also destroys pathogens. See, they found that the beta amyloid plaques would destroy the neurons of the brain, but when they tested it against pathogens like bacteria, viruses, they found that it was very, very potent. So I pose a question, are these plaques an adaptive response? Is your body doing something to protect itself? And what you're seeing that's manifesting in the brain, simply an adaptation to something that is detrimental to your health. Well, let's consider this further, okay? Let's look at this further. It destroys these pathogens. Clue number one. When they tested drugs, see, this tremendous amount of money has been put into drugs that will remove these amyloid plaques, okay? And I'm not saying that that's not going to be part of the solution. It's, you know, it could be part of the solution. However, whenever they removed these plaques, it made people, because there are drugs that have done it, but when they removed it, most people had no improvement, but most of them became significantly worse. It rapidly accelerated their decline. And if you think about it for a second, okay, if this is an adaptive response by the body, and I tend to believe in what the body does. If you cut your hand, it heals all by itself. Modern medicine doesn't know how to do that, but the body does. The body's always working to self-preserve, because if it wasn't, you'd be dead. You'd die. The body's always trying to save you, always. So if we trust in the adaptive process of the body, of the knowledge of the body, and honor what it's trying to do, and say, you know what, we don't understand exactly how the body works, but we want to observe it and know that it's always trying to help us, right? So if you think about it that way, then you can see this, you can rationalize, okay, this is probably an adaptive response. It's trying to heal us, but heal from what? Pathogens and a number of other things we're going to talk about are driving, they're getting into the brain, they're driving this inflammatory process. The brain is forming plaques to help neutralize and kill and stop these pathogens. And as a side effect, we lose neurons and nerve cells, and we have cognitive decline. And we see the characteristic changes in the brain on imaging that are associated with Alzheimer's. Loss of neuron density. We see significant changes in the brain with beta amyloid plaque formation and these tangles, these neurofibrillary tangles. Major problems. So when you see this, you know, why has there been this failure? Why has there been a failure? And it's simply because medicine approaches this as what? What does medicine do? I've already hinted at it. As a single disease. They approach it as a singular disease. And here's what we know. We know that there are, through a tremendous amount of research by a lot of researchers, we know that there are 36 driving factors that have been identified thus far. These driving factors, they trigger a molecular switch on the nerve cells. Okay, they trigger the APP molecular switch. Amyloid, precursor protein. Amyloid, precursor protein. When this switch is triggered a certain way, it promotes amyloid plaque formation and the changes we see with cognitive decline. So far, 36 drivers have been identified. We believe that it will be probably, before it's said and done, 50 to 100. But with this data, with these 36 drivers being identified, Alzheimer's cognitive decline has already been documented and published in the peer-reviewed index literature to be slowed, halted, and even reversed, stopped and reversed. So 36 driving factors, testing these, identifying them, has given researchers and doctors that are on the leading edge of this the ability to apply this information to each person that they're working with, their health, help them to slow, halt, and reverse this. Now, there have been 6 subtypes identified. So medicine says it's a single disease. Research already shows us that we at least have 6 different subtypes. Here are the subtypes. I'm going to give them to you quickly. Type 1, subtype number 1 is inflammatory. Subtype number 2 is glycotoxic. It means that blood sugar fluctuations destroy the neurons of the brain. They're calling it type 3 diabetes in the scientific literature. The next type is atrophic. You don't have vitamins, minerals, and hormones necessary for the neurons, the nerve cells of the brain, to stay healthy. So they degenerate, creating these negative changes. The next type is toxic. If you get exposed to mold, about 1 in 4 people will have an inflammatory response that's perpetual. It's called chronic inflammatory response. That will create major problems for you and promote these issues. If you have Lyme disease, if you have exposure to a number of industrial chemicals, to agricultural chemicals, to metals, it will promote these problems. So that's the toxic subtype. Then there's cerebrovascular. If you have atherosclerosis, if you have plaquing and you can't get oxygen and blood to the brain, you're going to have problems that will trigger this amyloid precursor protein to cause beta amyloid formation and neurofibrillary tangles and the negative effects and things that we see with Alzheimer's. So there's hypoxia, low oxygen delivery to the brain. The most common source of that is sleep apnea. Okay, and then the final subtype is traumatic. So head injury is a major predisposing factor to these problems. So 6 subtypes all can be considered as different diseases, different subtypes of Alzheimer's. Medicine is looking at it very singularly. They're looking at, what I like to say, they're looking at the smoke rather than the fire. They see an adaptive change like beta amyloid plaques, but they're not asking specifically enough and looking at why they're forming and trying to address those driving factors. Now, I think that the amyloid plaques are going to be part of the solution, addressing them to some degree, but we've got to look at these factors that promote the formation in the first place. And doesn't it make sense that if you have these driving factors, an inflammatory process, a chronic infection, you're deficient in nutrients, you're deficient in hormones, you have sleep apnea, you have low oxygenation of the brain at night while you sleep, these driving factors, they're the fire, they're burning, they're the cause, right? If we don't address those, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, you're seeing these adaptive changes, these amyloid plaques, and all of these symptoms that the person's having. And yes, it's valuable to try to help with symptoms, but what real good long term is it if we're not addressing the fire? We're just fanning the smoke, right? We've got to address the fire. This is very important. So this is the approach that a lot of researchers have taken. You know, I have gone through training by the researcher, Dr. Bredesen, that has documented and published in the peer-reviewed index medical literature slowing, halting, and reversal of Alzheimer's. I've gone through his training. I know exactly the protocols that they utilize. I'm a Bredesen qualified practitioner, and this is what I do in practice. I help people around the world. We work with people in other countries. We work with people across the U.S. We look at their health history in a very detailed manner, and we help them to investigate the drivers of these factors. Now, the new approach, the approach that we take, is an approach that detects the problems first. D for detect the problems. Take a very detailed history from the person, and then you get testing that looks at these 36 driving factors in great detail so that a very specific plan can be put together to try to help this person slow, halt, and reverse the causes, the fire, the things that are driving the process. Detect is number 1. When you get that data back, then you formulate a plan and you remove, which we're going to use an R. You remove and replenish. So you remove the things in the way, you replenish the things that are needed. Once you've done that and you've given the body a little bit of a chance to heal, then you repair and optimize. I tell people it's detect, remove, repair. You repair and optimize, and you put together a plan that is unique to the individual. I call it bio-individualized. It is unique to their biochemistry, to their causes. You've done the work to detect what is happening, what is driving that person's particular problems, and you put together a plan to address their unique situation. It does not work, as medicine has shown us, to take an approach that looks at one mechanism through a drug to address a problem that is unique to every individual and that has many, many factors. You have to match the complexity of the solution has to match the complexity of the problem, or you will not have meaningful results. And that's what we've seen with medicine. Tremendous amount of money has been spent on trying to figure out, how to plug these 36 holes that are creating the problems. And the reality is that it's going to take a very comprehensive approach. And that is what we do. If you want to learn more about this, if you're struggling with this, if you have Alzheimer's in your family, you're trying to prevent it, if you've been diagnosed with subjective cognitive impairment, mild cognitive impairment, which are like the precursors, they come before Alzheimer's, or if you have a loved one or a friend or someone that's interested in this, please do share this information with them. I have a program I created called the Saving the Brain program. You can go to our website, you can look and learn all about it, learn about what it means to work with me as a distance consulting client across the US and other countries. Just go to new.alzconsult.com. That's new.alz for Alzheimer's consult.com. You don't have to have Alzheimer's. We're really talking about the brain here. So just new.alzconsult.com. and you can learn all about it. You can request an appointment there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to help you. Post your questions, comments here, and let us know what you think about this video, and we will try to respond to you. But I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.